to the Colorado build. We are getting very close. In this one, I'm going to cover mainly the odds and ends that I need to get done to get this thing officially started up. I have a decent amount of things left. Nothing too intense. Everything from here on out is pretty straightforward, I think, except for the exhaust. That's the one thing that I'm still kind of scratching my head on, mainly because beyond the headers, I don't have anything planned out yet. And I don't know how to weld. So one thing I did do is went out and bought this little guy, which it's a crappy Harbor Freight flux core welder. I want to teach myself how to weld, so I am probably going to mess around with it and see if I can at least get an exhaust maybe tacked up and then take it somewhere to get officially welded out by someone that actually knows how to weld. So that's kind of my plan. But again, it's all kind of TBD. I may try to start it as is and just cut it off quickly, but I'm really concerned about this side because of the clutch line, and there's a fuel line that's pretty close. So I just kind of want the exhaust on it before I run it for any period of time, just so I'm not, risking any fires on my newly swapped truck. So all that being said, I'm gonna just jump in, keep grinding away on the odds and ends, try to get this thing 100% ready to fire, figure out what I want to do with the exhaust, at least in the short term, and then I'll be starting this thing up. So let's jump in. What I just finished tackling was the intake. As expected, I did have to kind of redo the upper radiator hose. I talked to that in my last video. The angle of it before, it was almost on kind of a 45. Now it's basically on like a 90. So luckily I'd had a bunch of different size radiator hose left around. So I basically played around with hoses and found this combination. Basically a 90 that comes up to my steam port fitting piece, and then just a small straight section here to connect it. So that allowed me to get the intake in. Now, details on the intake, when I got the harness from Current, I opted to go with an LS3, which is, I think they call it like a blade style MAF. So it's kind of like the flat blade one. There's a couple different styles you can do. I just chose to do that one. I don't know. I'm not sure why. At the time I did some research and decided it would be a good option. Because of that, I needed some type of housing that would take, this blade style mass airflow sensor. So I kind of looked around at different intake options. I know a lot of people run Silverado intakes or intakes from a Colorado V8 because it, fits up perfectly. I knew I needed this style, so I started looking around at options for LS3 intakes because I knew this is an LS3 style MAF, and ended up coming up with this option on eBay. Made the seller an offer, got this intake for 70 bucks. So it's 4 inches. They give you these kind of nice T-bolt clamps. They give you this 90 elbow, the pipe, 4-inch pipe, and then this filter. The filter, if you can tell, is like an offset designed filter. So it's the hole is not centered. It kind of offsets to one side, which I thought was goofy, but actually for this application worked out perfectly. If it was centered, my filter probably would have ran into some of the radiator support there. So all said, this $70 intake actually fit up pretty well. In the future, I have a feeling that this coupler, it's just crappy rubber, probably won't hold up, so I'll probably have to do a nicer silicone coupler there. And I can see, especially if this radiator hose ends up becoming a problem or whatever else, I can see potentially cutting this pipe and then doing like a 45 here, so the intake would kind of come down and over, which would give more clearance for the upper radiator hose. But all around, I really can't complain. This intake for $70, well worth it. It's in. It looks pretty clean. Like it looks more or less at home in here. It's huge. It's 4 inches, and on top of it, the bonus is they give you the heat shield as well, which fits I guess it's a Camaro SS is what it's made for. But I kind of played around with the heat shield a little bit, and I think eventually I can probably modify it and get it to fit and just kind of box this whole section off. So I'll have, you know, a little bit more of a shielded intake setup. So that's probably like a day 2 type of thing. Obviously I don't need that to get the truck running and driving, but you know, if I have time and I feel like tackling that at some point, I will probably add the heat shield on. But yeah, happy to have this done, and getting a lot closer. I didn't talk about brake booster yet, but I did finish this a few days ago. I won't spend much time on it. There's a few ways you can tackle this. The brake booster hose is a fairly good sized vacuum hose. The factory Colorado one is really goofy and won't really work. So you need something longer. I opted I had some of this extra vacuum hose laying around. I opted to basically use a reducer, reduce the size of the brake booster hose to a smaller vacuum hose, and then just ran it up here to this port, which is not being used. Now, the only issue that I see here, I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but I will have to watch it. If for some reason my power brakes are not working very well, I'll probably end up switching this up. A lot of people, there's a plug in the back of the truck intake manifold there that you can actually get an adapter that's the same size as this. It's on Amazon, it's like $7. You basically put that in there, then you run that same size vacuum hose just from here over to the brake booster, and you have, it's kind of like more of an OE solution. So very well may end up doing that, but again, if this works for now, I will keep this for a while, and then at some point, like I said, kind of phase 2, when I want to clean stuff up, I'll probably run the line across the back there, clean it up. But yeah, for now it's good. And just so everyone knows, there's another vacuum port too on the side of the truck intake manifold. I don't know, I think this one might be used for like EGR or something, one of the emission systems. So I just capped that one off. Probably won't be using it, but it's good to know that I do have an extra vacuum port at some point if I need it. So off camera, I was in the middle of kind of getting everything buttoned up over there, and I decided to make a little plate to put on the AC little block that is on the firewall, kind of between the the inside of the cabin and the engine bay. I didn't want to leave that open. I'm not running AC right away. I'll be adding that probably later, kind of a phase 2 thing. So I had it taped off. It doesn't look very nice. I had this ABS laying around. It's like 1/4 inch thick or so. So just made a nice little square plate that'll bolt on there, plug it up, make sure nothing gets in there. All right, you guys saw me install the ECU. So this is the new ECU from Current for specific to my swap, I think E67 ECU. You guys also saw me reinstall the reservoirs, coolant, and windshield wiper, and then the last thing that I did here was put in that plate, which you guys can see there. I also had this little clip laying around from the LS harness, which fit on there perfectly and kind of keeps my current harness in place there. So everything's looking nice and clean, and we're getting a bit closer. I can check these two off the list officially. Okay, off camera, I got the headers torqued down on each side, 18 foot-pounds for all the bolts. You work from the center outward. And I also got the plug wires installed. Plug wires I'm using are, the brand was Hinson plug wires, 45-degree angle, red. Like the way they look for sure. They went in fairly easily, so seem like decent quality. That's it. I will check both header bolts and plug wires off the list. Latest update. Yesterday I decided to try and get all the rest of the wiring buttoned up, which I pretty much did. So just walking through what I did yesterday, got the rest of the current harness kind of wrapped around here. There's a block on the current harness that goes into the factory fuse box, so got that installed, got the fuse box installed. The rest of the Colorado battery harness tied into the fuse box, so I got all of that cleaned up, buttoned up. There's also this current, I think it's the fan relay, so I got that installed. They give you a little bracket to mount it, and there was an unused hole in my fender right here, so I ended up just making a little L bracket and installing the current relay right on that L bracket, so it's nice and solid, and I didn't have to drill into the body at all. So that means the current harness, like I said, 100% buttoned up. I have to do a little bit of work back there just to make it look cleaner and kind of attach it against the body there. The only thing really left is this wiring that current gives you for the fan. So this will be kind of the last piece of the wiring. Alright, so what I just finished here is wiring for the fan, which should have been a lot easier than it was. 100% my fault. So the other night I decided to go on a rampage and try to get the fan wired up. It's really not that difficult of a task. Current makes it pretty easy. I don't know what I was thinking, but Current provides a fan relay in the harness. That's what this is. For whatever reason, when I was ordering parts, just kind of ordered a relay and didn't really think about it. I should have done more research. I also ordered a temperature sensor and a little ICT adapter, which you can see in the back of the head there, to adapt it into the head, and like I was all ready to go. And the other night I was thinking that the fan wire they provided was not what it actually was, and all that being said, I kind of ended up having to redo a lot of stuff that I did the other night. I emailed Current and they confirmed what I screwed up. So I was overthinking it. So basically my fan has two wires coming out of that. One's a positive, one's a negative. Pretty simple. Current gives you the, they label it fan 1, which is what this is right here. That's your positive. You just ground the negative. I grounded it down here to a bolt that holds a brake line bracket on. So yeah, basically wired the fan 1 up. You can see the plug down there, so just used a zip tie and kind of tied it on the bottom of the radiator. So that gives power to the fan. It's grounded. Then it runs over here, and the only other two wires I had to hook up were I believe this is power wires to the actual fan relay, which Current had made it easy for me, but again, I had accidentally cut the ends off the other night. So long story short, I ended up extending those. So just put like about a 12-inch extension on each one of those, and then ran each one of those to positive and negative battery terminal. So it, again, should have been easier than it was. Basically, the two bat wires go to the battery, fan wire goes directly to the fan. You ground out the negative, and that's it. You're done. The ECU should control the fan cutting on and off based on temperature, so there's no need for that external sensor that I bought. So I both wasted money and wasted time, but I learned. So I'm done. Hopefully it's clear to everyone now. Like it's pretty straightforward. It's really just 3 wires that you have to, well, 4 wires that you have to hook up. I tried to make it as clean as I could, get stuff out of the way. These, until I make sure everything's working fine, I'm just gonna leave these kind of loose, but eventually I'll tape them up and kind of make them part of the loom. So each one of these is just sort of like one wire going into the battery. I've been using this stuff a lot. It's called Tessa tape. You can get it on Amazon. It's like $8 or $9. It's got a really cool texture. So that's what this is here. It's kind of like a fabric tape. A lot of the European car manufacturers use it on their harnesses. So I've been doing like the fan harness down here that I kind of did a little bit of work too. I ended up wrapping in that stuff, and I like it a lot. It looks a lot nicer than regular electrical tape. So yeah, if anyone's interested, Tessa tape. It's supposed to be pretty temperature resistant too. I am now 100% done with the wiring. There is no more wiring to do. Everything's hooked up. I don't think I talked about the wiring very much, but that's because it's extremely self-explanatory. Current gives you these nice little labels on all the wires. For instance, there's throttle body, you know, over here there's, you can see alternator. So I'm not really gonna go into much detail. The only things that you have to know when you're buying the current harness is that you have to reuse the factory Colorado battery harness, which has the BCM in it. So make sure to keep that. You have to reuse that. I mentioned the wiring to the starter, so you have to extend that wire. And then you have to wire up the fans, and that's pretty much it. Outside of that, the current harness does everything. Plug and play, very simple, very self-explanatory. If anyone has questions, let me know. But again, I don't really see the need to go into detail because current makes it super easy. So that is it. I can cross wiring and fan wiring off the list. Back under the Colorado, wanted to show a few things I checked off the list today. So wanted to get the rest of my heat wrapping done. This is one of the some kind of body harness that goes along the frame rail here, obviously very close to the header. Wanted to make sure I got it wrapped, so picked up some heat wrap, some stainless zip ties. So got this wrapped and as out of the way as I can. I'm hoping that's going to be okay. I've already showed the clutch line, that's all wrapped up, and then I had some extra vibrant wrap, so I also put some on the fuel line here. So everything that's kind of right near the header outlet is wrapped. So I'm feeling better about that. While I was under here, I also put some oil in the filter, got the filter on. And if anyone's curious about the clearance on the cross member, so I got the cross member installed. You can see the clearance there. So like probably it's, I don't know, 1/4 inch or so. So not bad. Looks fairly clean. Quick little sidebar, I had some time today. This truck never had an official battery tie down of any sort. I don't really know why. All it had was kind of the battery box down here, which was never secured. I was thinking about buying a factory one, but just didn't feel like spending money on it. So again, I had a little bit of time today, decided to just build something. So had this little T-bracket, drilled a couple holes here and used the T-bracket kind of to build the strap off of. And the strap basically just goes over to a bolt, which I assume was originally used to hold the battery down. So I just used some like metal strapping that I had. Took a couple of rubber grommets off the P-clip. I'll show like a close-up picture here of what the underside looks like. And then basically just kind of bolted that all together. And I had this eBay heat tape, which I bought. Was too afraid to actually use on anything important, so I was like, kind of a cool look. So I'll have to do something else in the engine in the same tape to make it match. But anyway, you basically just slide this bracket onto the two little bolts, flip it over, bolts down, holds the battery in very tight. This thing is not going anywhere. So battery tie down, not something I had on the list, but something that needed to be done. So happy with it, and only took me, I don't know, probably 45 minutes or so to make. All right, walking through the fuel system from underneath here. I can't remember if I showed this in any of the other videos, but I actually ended up moving the evap vent from further forward in the truck to the back. I was a little bit concerned about having it too close to the exhaust, so I basically traced the evap line all the way back here. I tried to pull it out, but the line is really wound up around a bunch of stuff kind of along the side of the frame, so difficult to pull out. Decided to just kind of tie it up out of the way, which is that, and then I put my vent filter right on the evap box here. So that should vent the tank, and means that the vapor is kind of contained to the rear of the car. So hopefully less risk of a fire or anything of that sort. Moving forward, while I was under here, I needed to replace these straps on the drive shaft, because my factory ones almost stripped out when I was trying to take the drive shaft out. So I just put new ones of those on. Moving forward to the rest of the fuel system. What I tried to do here originally was leave this factory section of line. You have to leave the factory section of line because of the fuel pressure sensor. I was going to run an AN line from this point here with a, an AN, quick disconnect to AN. Just move it over here along the frame, and then right back here to the this outlet on the tank itself. The theory here was leave the stock Colorado line, run an AN line to get rid of all these goofy bends, more efficient, easier. Have the line completely built. I'll show a picture of it here. And could not get that AN fitting, the 3/8 quick disconnect, over this barb on this fuel line. So the barb on this fuel line is plastic. It seems to be slightly larger than 3/8, because I had absolutely no issues with the rest of my Earl's 3/8 AN female quick disconnect adapters. I had zero issues anywhere else except for right here on this plastic fitting. I had an extremely difficult time getting the factory one off, and then I could not get that that AN fitting on there. It just would not go. So I ended up having to bag that idea. What I ended up doing was flipping the Colorado section of line here around. So this fitting, the fitting that was here, is actually now here. The reason I did that is because when I was playing with the line, it seemed like the bends were a little more comfortable with the way I have this line routed. So it's the same line that was here, it's just completely flipped around 180 from where it was before. So obviously snakes around here to the factory line. One of the things I did do here, knowing that I was using the factory line and routing it kind of into a similar spot, is I ended up utilizing the same factory bracket that was on here and then modifying it. So I put my own L bracket and then just put one of these plastic fuel line holders on the L bracket, and that holds the line pretty well in place. So just kind of modified the factory bracket here to hold the line. It looks clean, and it works well. And then going forward, I replaced that fuel pressure sensor. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that you need to keep on 2009 and up. And then line goes forward, ended up heat wrapping it, obviously because of the proximity to the exhaust here. And then this line snakes up, and I'll show the line from the top. Looking at the top portion of the fuel system. So you have the factory fuel line coming up here, coming up, basically ends right around where the brake booster is, and that's where it goes to the factory rubber line, over to the 3/8 factory quick connect fitting, and then to the LS fuel rail. So I played around with this a million times. I tried to basically just get this LS or try to get the factory Colorado fuel line to mate up with the LS, and it just wouldn't go. It looked like it wanted to kink too much. So what I ended up doing is buying a couple AN fittings. So I have a 3/8 quick connect to 6AN, 6AN female to female, and then a 6AN to 3/8 90 with the fuel fitting on the end, so like the 3/8 male fuel fitting on the end. So this together on the factory fuel rail basically just extends the length of the factory rail, and then also gives me a 90 on the male 3/8 fitting, which putting that on and then connecting this made the top portion of the Colorado hose a lot happier. So I'm hoping this all works. There's one bend here in the Colorado hose that I'm not wild about, but it doesn't look like a full kink, so I'm hoping I have enough flow. We will see. If the thing does not start, does not want to run, or does not like being at higher RPMs, then I can pretty much assume that it's got something to do with not getting enough fuel. So hoping this works. The fuel system in general, if I was doing this again, I 100% would have done it differently. I spent a fair amount of money on fittings that I ended up not using. I bought AN line that I didn't use, as explained a minute ago. So if I was going to redo this, I basically would have ran the factory Colorado line back to the factory hard line. The factory hard line, I would have kept that at least through where the factory fuel pressure sensor is. So 2009 and up Colorados, you have to use that factory fuel pressure sensor. It took me a long time to find this information. So if anyone's doing a swap in a 2009 or newer, you guys have to keep that fuel pressure sensor that's in line down there. If you have an earlier year, especially a returnless earlier year, it's a lot easier because you just basically have one line all the way up. You don't have to worry about that sensor. So you could really just run AN line the entire way. But for us 2009 and up, we have to use that. We have to use that piece of line with that fuel pressure sensor in it. So I didn't realize when I was doing all this that there's a AN fitting that you can buy that basically crimps on to the end of a hard fuel line. But if I would have known that, I would have just bought one of those. And what I would have done is ran factory Colorado all the way forward through where that fuel pressure sensor is. And then I would have cut the line somewhere, probably shortly after that fuel sensor, and then had the 6AN, adapter from that line all the way up to just AN line, and then AN line all the way to the LS fuel rail. Would have been a lot cleaner. Would have just been basically one AN line that I would have made all the way down, instead of like this kind of messy setup of fittings here / flipping around a Colorado line in the back. I don't know for sure that if this will even work, but for phase 2 or if this doesn't work, that's probably what I'm going to end up having to do. So for anyone that's doing it, that's what I would do. Chop the line after the fuel pressure sensor, run AN just from that hard line up to the rail, you'll be good. Wish I would have known that before I started buying a bunch of stuff. So anyway, you live and you learn. The list is almost fully complete. It's kind of crazy. The only thing really left here to do is the exhaust. I'm waiting to install the shifter so I can do the gear oil at the same time, but I don't want to do that until I know the motor's running fine. So yeah, basically outside of fluids, the last thing to do is the exhaust. This list kind of got short pretty quick. That will wrap it up. Unfortunately, in this one, we're not going to do a first start. That's probably going to be for the next video. Basically, the same thing I said in the beginning of this video. The exhaust is really the limiting factor. But this time I do have a plan. At the end of the video, I finally have a plan. I did buy a Speed Engineering Y-pipe. So that's what was in this box. I'm working on getting the Y-pipe installed. It is hung up, kind of mocked up in place down there, and I have bought a few additional pieces, and I'm at least going to try to get the thing clamped on so I have, my exhaust running through the headers, through the wide pipe and back, probably without a muffler, but I'd like to get to that point before I start this thing up. So we're very close. Next video will be showing what I did with the exhaust, maybe a few other small things, and then it should be the first start and potentially the first drive. So that wraps it up for this one. Thank you guys again for watching. We are getting very close. So stay tuned and we will have this thing on the road shortly. Thanks, guys.